Welcome back, Jack Athletes. Straight into it, I'm going to explain how Valentin Blanc trains for unbelievable planche strength. There are three main things Valentin focuses on to get his god-level planche strength, and both you and I probably don't do them. The first two are the main things he focuses on and will be the main content in this video, and those two things are his training style archetype and his training programming. The third and final part of this video will be the third thing that he focuses on, which will be his diet, his prehab and conditioning, and how he trains differently to gymnasts. Valentin also sent me an equation to help me understand his training style, which I'll explain also. So if you do want to find out exactly what exercises, exactly what the programming is, you know, how many times a day, etc., you will have to buy their program, which you will be able to find on their social media platforms. So you guys have probably noticed there's different archetypes of calisthenics training. You have freestyle, you have sets and reps, you have statics, you have weighted calisthenics. All of these are very different in how you train for them. But from looking at these clips of Valentin, what would you say his archetype is? For me, I would say it's combinations. And when you think about it, what he did to get really good at this archetype is pretty simple. He trained specifically for combinations. And I'll explain exactly what that looks like, but this is also exactly what he preaches in his programs, is combinations. If you watched my last video on calisthenics strength principles, and if you haven't, you really should if you're training for calisthenics. But in this video, I explain what the said principle is, and now I'm gonna explain how Valentin uses this principle to his advantage. If you don't remember what the said principle is or haven't watched the last video yet, then here's a quick reminder. So what this principle means, explained very simply, is whatever you challenge your body with, your body will get better at. So if you challenge your body with running, your body will adapt and get better at running. If you challenge your body with swimming, your body will get better at swimming. If you challenge your body with strength training, then your body will get better at strength training by gaining more strength. And this is what Valentin has baked into his training from very early. Strength and endurance, which equals combinations. This is how he trains. He trains specifically for combinations, so his body gets better at combinations. It's very quite simple when you think about it. So instead of training like you and I, who are probably doing static sets, then resting, then doing another static set, then resting, then after that going to dynamics, then resting, instead Valentin is training like he's prepping for a competition constantly. He's doing sets and sets of combinations. So this could be one static skill into a dynamic skill, into another static, into a dynamic skill, and then he keeps going, and these are combination sets. Then he rests, so that whole combination was one set, then he repeats. This is one of the things that makes the difference. And just like the said principle states, if you challenge your body with combinations, your body will get better and adapt to combinations. But let me be very clear, this doesn't mean he's always training very hard and very long combinations. I'll explain this more in the next section of the video when I talk about his programming. But this is where I quickly want to explain a bit about his mindset and why he trains this way, because this will really predict whether you should train this way as well. So this is him in an interview explaining why he trains with such combinations and why he loves the planche.
Planche is not just a skill, you know, it's like all complete category, you know, and if you want to perform perfectly every element with every variation in all different possible senses, then no, for me, you know, planche and balance is a sport, and the rest is the rest, you know.
So as you can see, he sees strength as being able to do one thing into another, into another, into another, into another. So linking strength and endurance, that's pure strength to him in these bodyweight movements. So guys, if this is your goal as well, you want to be able to do combinations, you might as well start at your level. Once you've done the foundational level of strength, which he also recommends in his program, there's a foundational level of strength you have to be at before you start learning the planche. Then when you get to the planche, you can start working on combinations, which is just linking an exercise to another exercise. You don't have to be expert level to do this. So that's one way. But if also you want to perfect your static skills, this is kind of more what I want to do. I want to do combinations as well, but I want to perfect my static skills. So instead I work on perfecting my static skills individually, and then once I have them down and the form I want, I bring them together and then the combinations. So that's another way of doing it. So it's different approaches. I'm yet to know which one's better. One might be better than the other, but only time will tell, and maybe sometime I'll make a video on this. So we've established his training archetype, which is combinations, how he does this, which is specific training using the said principles. So he trains specifically for combinations to get better at combinations. And we've explained why he does this, because he sees this as the epitome of strength. But now in the second portion of the video, we're going to get into the juicy stuff, his training programming, which is going to explain how he manages volume, intensity, and form, and how they relate to each other. Now I asked him in DMs how he's able to manage volume and intensity to learn these really hard skills and combinations, and this is what he said.
If you want to be able to perform a simple and short effort in clean form, so the way is to produce medium form, high volume, then convert it into something clean.
Now to sum that up, if you didn't catch that, what he was saying is pretty much what I was saying in the calisthenics strength video. You pretty much want to train in cycles. One cycle you have high volume and then medium to low intensity. This is your hypertrophy phase. Then once you've done that, you've trained high volume, then you go to low volume, higher intensity. So this is your neural adaptations, which is strength training. But what he does differently is form is intensity. So when you're changing the intensity, you're actually changing the form. Here's what he said about this.
First you grow volume, then you convert into something clean. Then you grow volume again and you convert into something clean.
Guys, this is literally what I was saying in the calisthenics strength principle video. You want to train high volume, gain muscle, adapt to the high volume, then convert this into strength. Now again, the only difference here is Valentin uses form as intensity. And you might be wondering, okay, why is form intensity? But let's listen to see what he says about this.
Then volume a low intensity, form is intensity.
To explain his point a bit more clearly, he sent me an equation. This was form equals lever plus control equals intensity. So what this means is form is dependent on the lever and your control, and this also equals intensity. So form equals intensity, but it's dependent on the lever and your control. So in the full planche, you have less leverage. So this means it's going to be harder to perform with good form, which means it's higher intensity. But in the tuck planche, you have much more leverage because the lever is shorter, which means the intensity is lower, which allows much better form. And now from my understanding, the control part is more the neural adaptations. So are you activating the right muscles and have control over the movement? The more you can control the movement, the easier the form will be, and that will adjust the intensity. So how does Valentin use this? So first he trains really long sets, but to do this he has to reduce the form because form equals intensity. To do high volume you need to reduce the intensity. And to him intensity is form, so he has to do the longest sets with a bit less form. Then after training like this, he goes to more strength training. So he does shorter sets or shorter combinations, so that's less volume, but he increases the form. So he makes the form almost perfect, but for slightly shorter combinations. Then he keeps repeating this, he goes back to higher volume, longer sets, but reducing the form, and then converts this again to clean form but shorter combinations. I hope that makes sense. And then over time he keeps repeating this and it adds up to very long sets where it's clean form. But this takes months, maybe years. This is what Valentin also agrees with.
The key is volume of work. If you do things one by one, you will get the result of the intensity and the volume of your work.
Now to conclude this section, you might have the final question, okay, how much high volume should I do? Like, how long should my sets be, or how long should my combinations be when I'm starting out learning in this way? And I'll let Valentin answer that.
Do the maximum and shut up.
Okay, so now we've gone over his training archetype, which is combinations, and why he trains this way, and then we've also gone over what he does to train this way, which is his training programming. But now we're going to go over the final part of the video, which is going to be the extra stuff he kind of does, because when you get to this elite level, the little things really add up, so we're going to talk about those things now. Okay, so really quickly, I think Valentin nowadays only really trains push. I think he does a few pulling movements just to keep a nice balance, so he has strength in both areas, but I think his main focus is push. So of course this gives him more time to focus and perfect his pushing movements. If you're doing push-pull legs, you know, overhead press, squat, deadlift, planche, etc., it's going to be really hard to perfect every movement. But for Valentin, he focuses only on planche multis, presses, one-arm planche, stuff like that, all pushing movements. So it makes it a little bit easier to program. However, I'm pretty sure he still does pulling movements because he's a guy that's always about balance. So I'm pretty sure he balances out his push by still doing a bit of pull just to make sure his body is balanced. Another thing he focuses on to help with balance is his prehab and his conditioning. So he talks about this in another interview where he used to train 3 times a day for a year and he made a lot of progress, but then he got 6 months of injuries as a result. So I think nowadays he does an hour of stretching a day before he even trains.
Now I'm never injured because I know how to do my conditioning and stay safe, you know.
So he takes his mobility really seriously, and this is something that's similar to gymnasts. They take into account their flexibility and mobility. So during this video, you might have seen some similarities in how he trains and how a gymnast trains, but he says he trains very differently to a gymnast.
Different, or
yeah,
is it...
completely.
Yeah?
Yeah, because gymnasts are doing a lot of preparation. It's really organized, you know. It's because they are beginning so young, you know, and they are planned everything they do. We are really not doing it in the same way.
And what he's saying here is kind of true if we're talking about ring gymnasts. They go from static skill, transition to static skill, to transition to static skill. But Valentin is more about combinations that can be dynamic as well as static. So he's going from static to dynamic, to another transition, to static, to dynamic, mixing up. So instead of a lot of isometric contractions, he's getting a lot of different contractions, isometric, eccentric, all of that. So another thing is his mindset. So combinations, as we said, it's strength and endurance put together. So some days you're not going to have the strength, or some days you're not going to have the endurance, and he takes this into account. And the last thing I want to talk about is his diet, because you know diet is so important for gymnasts and for bodyweight athletes, because the strength we need is relative to our body weight. So how much we weigh is really going to depend on how strong we are. So we need our diet in check so our weight doesn't fluctuate a lot and we're as lean as we can be. If you watch my gymnast video, you know all about that. And something I will say is that Valentin, he eats only once per day. So what you need to take from this is you need to watch your diet, because this is really important for us bodyweight athletes, because staying as lean as we can and as light as we can is really important. And if you're like me, trying to cut body fat so you get a bit lighter and a bit stronger as a result, well then some things that will help is going to be supplements. An announcement is that we're teaming up with Vivo Life. Vivo Life is one of those rare supplement companies that are actually ethical and care about their users, the consumers, and the environment. So I really recommend them, especially as a vegan. I really recommend that you have a company, a supplement brand that actually cares about the environment and about their consumers and have good ethics. But anyway, I'll talk about that in another video about what supplements I take and what you want to take as a bodyweight athlete trying to stay lean. If you do want to check out any of their products, such as their protein, their creatine, or even their electrolyte complex, BCAAs, then all of that is in the description down below. You can use the code JACK10 for minus 10% off as well. Thank you to everyone that's using my code, that's purchasing equipment from Gore Nation, but now you can also use this code for Viva Life if you need any supplements for your calisthenics training as well. But in any case, if you missed the last video on the calisthenics strength principles that even Valentin Blanc uses, then click here, because the experts and calisthenics aliens you guys idolize, they use these principles to their advantage.